Hi, everybody. It's Romania Black, and we're on episode 50 of Monster. Last episode was really, really emotional, and seeing Grimmer have this visceral reaction saving Milos was just, oh my gosh. I didn't realize that so many people, I mean, granted, it was a really good episode. It was very good, but there were a lot of people being like, this is one of my favorites and all this, and I was like, man, I've said this before, but it would be very hard for me at this point to do an episode ranking. I feel like I kind of decided whenever Monster was finished, I would do an episode ranking and do like a big old like, okay, here's from least to favorite to most favorite of the Monster episodes. That's gonna be hard. That's gonna be really hard. I will say this is up there for me. Episode 49 is up there for me. There's lots of twists and reveals, but anything involving Grimmer, I mean, can we beat Grimmer? No, I don't think so. But I have quite a few comments I want to get to before we start this episode. Episode 50. It feels like a milestone, but for me, episode 52 is going to be the milestone because that's going to mean that I've been watching Monster for a year, and that's going to be a big one in a couple weeks. But episode 50 is a pretty big deal, right? Definitely. So let's get to these comments before we dive in. Evil Communist Pickle Rick, as well as Colgate Lampinen, all of the great handles. We're talking about this idea of Johan and them relating to Sook's mother and the idea of memory loss and things like that, and using communication. And someone else kind of explained the process of how Johan talking to Sook's mom could have like brought her out of into like a lucid state. But what I liked from the comments that were referring to all of that back in episodes 48 and 47 was the idea that Johan was using his power of communication, because Johan has power of communication. He's a really good communicator, but he was using it for good to bring Sook's mom back into this like very open and mindful state. And it was just so sad. We were talking in the comments about how if Johan would use his gifts for good, the world would be a lot better place, but Johan does not think the world is a good place or worth his skills. So that seems pretty clear at this point in the story. Could be wrong, but it seems pretty clear. CR talks about Johan recording in front of Sook's mom over the tape, and that could be why she told Lunge that Johan was a man. I hadn't thought about that. I was like, oh yeah, that would be a really good way of knowing that she heard Johan speak as a man and was like, oh, this is a guy that's dressed up as a woman. Huh. And then told Lunge that, so that makes sense. Thank you, CR. And also I liked CR talking about Lunge's objective research. What's kind of weird at this point is that we don't really know what Johan's objective is. If Johan's just messing with people, then his objective changes wherever he goes, and he just does things on a whim and is like, I feel like doing this today, now I'm going to do that. And he doesn't really have an overarching goal except to just mess stuff up and point out how shitty the world is to him. And so if that's the case, and Johan's really not flying by anything but the seat of his pants, that makes it hard for Lunge, because Lunge is so objective and he needs that concrete evidence and needs to think that there's an end goal in mind. Like if you're a villain, you have an end goal. Johan doesn't really have an end goal at this point that we know of. So for Lunge, that's hard for him to kind of gather data and research, especially when Johan is trying to erase himself from existence as Lunge is trying to find information about him. So it makes for a very interesting situation, right? So I'm glad you brought that up, CR. David talks about how Johan's reaction to "my mom will recognize me." My mom won't, will my mom recognize me? When Milos is telling Johan that is interesting. I would add to that comment that David made of being that, yeah, it's a pretty visceral reaction. When Milos is like, oh, my mom will recognize me. And Johan, like, the smile instantly goes, no, she won't. That seemed to me like a little bit of Johan slipping up and revealing that maybe his mom didn't recognize him. If we're going by my theory is that Johan at one point has dressed like Anna, has dressed like the sister to confuse the secret police or something else, and Johan was dressed as a woman, as a little girl. If that's the case, did the mom accidentally grab Johan and take them with her instead of Anna? That would have been a messed up thing. If your own mom got you mixed up with your sister, that'd be pretty messed up. So I don't know. But that line there does seem to indicate that Johan and his mother's relationship was not good. That's just what I'm gathering. Could be wrong. We could find out a bunch of different stuff here. And then Alex Cornejo, as well as Nameless Monster, we're talking just about how sad this episode is, but how sad the previous episode was, but how beautiful it is that Grimmer is able to be this light shining for Milos in that moment to save him, essentially. And Alex Cornejo added to Nameless Monster's comment, saying that there's a quote from St. Francis de Assisi that says, all the darkness in the world cannot extinguish the light of a single candle. Meaning that no matter how much darkness there is in the world, it cannot destroy the light and conviction and purity of someone trying to do good. And even if it's just one person, that's all it takes. And we see that in episode 49, that all it took was one person to care about Milos, and that was Grimmer. And that's all it took, and it saved him. And I told Alex Cornejo, I'm like, I'm reading Attack on Titan at the same time. I'm doing that. I'm looking at Heaven Official's Blessing. I'm reading that story. And in both of those stories as well, there is this kind of theme of sometimes just one person making the change, one person doing good and starting and sparking the fire is all that it takes. And I'm like, so good. It's so good. Last episode was just freaking amazing. I told everybody in the comments, the discussion was not long last episode because the content was pretty disturbing. So didn't really want to spend a lot of time talking about that. But with this episode coming up, who knows what we'll get. I feel like the monster discussions are very inconsistent. There's some that are like 37 minutes, some that are an hour. It just is going to vary per episode. And that's why I can only really do one episode at a time, because it'd be my luck. The 2 episodes I'd go, we'd have like a 2-hour discussion, and you all don't want to hear me talk that long. I don't want to hear me talk that long. So, in any case, I'm really excited to see what happens for episode 50. I'm very curious to see what we get, but we're not going to waste any more time. Lunge's in Prague, Nina and Dieter in Prague. Things are happening, and hopefully Milos is going to be okay. But we're going to find out and see what happens in this episode. And we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's go. There was a lot that happened in this episode. Oh my gosh, there was a lot that happened. Oh my gosh, I feel like last episode with Milos was just like this one singular little thing that, I mean, granted, there was a lot of stuff happening, but it was just with Milos and Johan, and then Tenma and Grimmer kind of followed along. It was this little episodic thing. Here, there was a lot of stuff happening. Lunge's having the time of his damn life. Lunge is just like walking around on his vacation being like, I'm finding out about the true terror of the world. It's like, what? I'm amazed at Lunge. I guess when we first met Lunge, I knew he was a good detective and I knew he had some notoriety to him, but I didn't quite, once you get to know Lunge and see how kind of like bizarre and sort of neurodivergent he is, you kind of forget, you're like, oh, well, he's just kind of a kooky detective. But then you realize, no, he has friends in high places. And he has all these connections, and the cases that he's solved has led him to have all this notoriety and all of these connections, even to the secret police. Like, he's able to get in places that took Tenma and Grimmer how long? Like, I'm so baffled by the fact that Lunge just does something and then it's like that. We're going to talk about him and that gunman. We're going to talk about that. But I was so amazed in that moment. And throughout this episode, at how easily Lunge just gets from place to place. He's busy, booked and busy, and he's got things to do. And this story gets more and more creepy and more mysterious. I'm really torn because we've only had Grimmer around for 10 episodes, and y'all were really nice last episode. Nobody spoiled it for me that he was leaving this episode. I mean, is he leaving for good? I don't know. I'm going to be kind of sad if he's gone for good, because I'm going to be honest, I don't think they're having that picnic. I don't think that Tenma and Grimmer are going to have that picnic except in our fanfic dreams. And I'm not joking, y'all. I have been like jonesing for some monster fan fiction, and I can't look up any because there's too big of a risk for spoilers. And after this episode, when Tenma's like, oh, we'll go have a picnic together and go do all this, I'm like, yes, you should, and yes, I'd love to read about it, but I feel like any fan fiction y'all find is going to have some kind of spoiler for the rest of the series, so I'm just going to have to, for the next 24 weeks, wait until I can read it. I was like, ah! But I need some Grimmer and Tenma fan fiction in my life. And you know what? It's sort of a damned if you do, damned if you don't. On the one hand, I really wish that Grimmer could stick around and help Tenma solve this case, but it's almost like the mangaka. The mangaka is basically saying, okay, if I want Grimmer to have a possibility of coming back later in the story, he needs to leave now. He needs to leave now if there's going to be a chance of him coming back. And Tenma, the one editor they talked to, has now told the police about him. So the police are after Tenma. The police do not need to catch Grimmer. That's just going to put a damper on the whole thing. How do we save Sook? Well, we save Sook by Grimmer posing as the serial killer and leaving the note and then going on the run. And that's how we solve that problem. I mean, Grimmer was on the run anyway, so what's this gonna hurt, right? Grimmer was on the run to begin with, so this isn't gonna affect him in the slightest. Just put more of a target on him, but he already had a target to begin with. But I feel like the mangaka was like, okay, I need to get Grimmer away from Tenma so that if there's a chance of him to come back in the story, that's how we do it. And it just, I feel like in the manga, I'm sure there was more of a lead up to it. I feel like it didn't just, in the anime, here he just turns around and he's like, okay, bye. And it's like, wait, what? There was no, I guess the preface of that was when he met Tenma after seeing the editor, and Tenma's like, what are you doing out here? And he's like, well, I'm walking with you for a way so that I can say goodbye. And that explains why he didn't want to go say goodbye to the kids on the soccer field, because he's like, I'm going to go away. I don't want them. We'll talk about that a little bit more in the scene, but it's like he didn't want them to expect him to keep coming back around and seeing them over and over again. He's got to go off and do his own thing. And so that's why he didn't say hi to them before. But we need to get through this episode. And I brought Whiteboard Coon out because I feel like we'd probably need Whiteboard Coon, but we need to get through this episode. I like that Lunge is on his mission, going around looking. He's got the hands out working it, trying to figure out where to go, and he ends up at the Rose Mansion. I mean, he goes and reaches for the bar and gets pricked by the rose bushes. I'm like, again, that's kind of a neurodivergency of Lunge. I feel like if you saw the briars there, why would you reach out and touch it? But again, it's him objectively being like, oh, these are roses. I needed to check with my finger to make sure of what they were. And looking like Sleeping Beauty's mansion. That editor, I mean, a combination of Sleeping Beauty and Beauty and the Beast, that'd sell like hotcakes. What'd you turn him down? I felt like he's like, well, that was my first option. My second option is a terror-filled story of nightmarish monsters. That's the one. What? Why? What are you people in Prague? What are we doing? Were we too afraid that Disney was going to come after us with that story? Let's get past this opening here. I do think, I guess it is fitting that Tenma is by himself with the gun. In the OP, I will say the one thing that is creepy about the OP, two things. One thing is that when Tenma's pointing the gun, it's a blue eye staring him back. We could say that it's Johan's, but I'm telling you, my biggest fear is that Tenma is going to pull that gun on Nina on accident and shoot her. That is my biggest fear at the series at this point. The other thing is, if you look at all the sketches that are being shown on the floor there, Johan's face is cut out of every sketch, and it's just Nina. No, Johan is not there. The face of Johan's not there. The face of Johan's covered. Nina is shown. It's all Nina shown, and Johan's face is not pictured in any of those drawings on the floor. It's like he wasn't there. It's very creepy. Right? And then we see Johan in the shadows, and we see him growing up, which is fascinating because now that we see Johan as an adult, it's like you see that we saw the silhouette of Bonaparte leaving the house. And even though Bonaparte does not look like Johan and Nina, their mom does, that shadow of him and the description of him being of gentleness. We'll talk about the description, but of him being gentle, it matches Johan very well, right? And him being smart matches Johan too. So there's that, right? But poor Sook, I feel for him. He looked really good in this episode. Sook looked really good. I like him with his bangs down like that. Makes him look younger. They draw him with his like collarbone more pronounced, which he's been in the hospital, so that makes sense. I'm going to put Lunge over here and just talk about what we're doing. Lunge's on his vacation. Having a grand old time. And then we're going to put Sook here. Sook is still in the hospital, but he is under under protection of the secret police. For now, he's under protection of the secret police, and to prove his innocence, which Grimmer was going to do this anyway, so it's not like it's something Grimmer just thought up. He was planning this for a long time now, but Grimmer is going to leave the letter of the serial killer behind and basically risk being on the run. Which he was kind of that way to begin with, but unfortunately Grimmer is a very easily detectable person, so I am worried about him, but we'll talk about that scene again when he tells Tenma that he's leaving. But I like that Lunge is interesting in this entire episode because his attitude and everything, where he's just like, you're important to them. He's like, I already know everything that's happened, and that's when Sook tells him about how he's not the culprit. What's interesting here is it's almost like, in a very weird way, I'm not saying Lunge kind of like looks after Sook in this, but he's like, well, you're a detective, aren't you? So here's what you have to do as a detective to make it work. He's like, you know who the culprit is. And Sook's like, well, he doesn't want to admit that he thinks it's Anna. And he's like, I've been set up to take the fall. And he's like, I don't want to be betrayed by anybody. And he says, well, you're a detective. If you're a detective, you have to calmly dissect the situation. And even if it's painful, you must calmly uncover the truth. So he says that even if painful, you have to calmly uncover the truth. I felt like in that sense, Lunge is relating a little bit to his family there, and the fact that his family has left him, and that he's like, well, my family's left me and I'm doing this, but I still have to uncover the truth. It's part of who I am. It's part of what I do. I feel like that Lunge was trying to get at that throughout this, that he was hinting at that, but Sook wouldn't have any idea what that's like, so he doesn't know. He doesn't know Lunge's story like we do. And then he says, if you don't want to be betrayed anymore, then start doubting the person you want to doubt the least. So he has the phrase there. He says, doubt the one you want to doubt the least to avoid betrayal. Now, what's interesting is that is good advice to Sook, because the person that Sook doubts the least is Anna, and that's the person you should doubt the most because it's actually Johan. The hilarious thing about that is that I think that for Lunge, the person he doubts the most is Tenma, and that's the person that he wants to doubt the least. So it's just like, in Lunge's case, I don't know if that advice is great, but in Sook's case, that advice works really well. So it's just interesting. He kind of just looks after Sook and treats him differently than others, even though Sook is so similar to Tenma. It's interesting. Even though Sook is so similar to Tenma, he treats him very differently in this situation. And then when he walks out, the guy is like, who gave you permission to see him? And the thing of it is he holds his hand out, and the guy is like, what? And he holds the hand out, and when he comes towards him with the hand, when he comes towards him like he's going to grab him, the guy freaks out, and he's able to get the gun and says, I want to see your boss. Now, here's the thing. One, the guy might have just been like, oh, this man's crazy. I don't want to mess with him. He just literally held his hand out and I could have shot him with my gun, but that's freaky, so what? And maybe Lunge was anticipating that. But the other thing is, we've just established in this episode that the man in the Rose Mansion is a psychologist, psychiatrist, and a freaking brain surgeon. We'll talk about that. And he is the one that we believe, based on Nina's memories, is the guy doing this in the OP, where he's doing the same thing with his hand coming towards the camera. So the question is this guy that's a guard, is he somebody who's been influenced or been in contact with Bonaparte? I don't know. It's just a weird gesture, and the animation of it matches the OP, so it's kind of creepy.
He's like, I want to speak to him about the Rose Mansion. Okay, okay. I was like, where is the title of this episode? I was waiting for it, and it's the Rose Mansion. Never mind. I just put a thing on Discord before I started this discussion being like, what was the title of this episode? I didn't see the title card. I missed it. It's the Rose Mansion. Okay. And so he's like, Inspector Lunge. So, Colonel rank. You're practically the head of the old Czechoslovakian secret police. Lunge is so confident in this episode. He's just like exuding confidence. And I'm like, this is the guy that like 20 episodes ago was crazily trying to run Tenma off the road while making him confess his crimes that he didn't commit. So I'm like, what a weird situation, right? So rank. Maybe it's Ranky. I don't know. I'm going to call him Rank. He's a colonel who is now the head of the old secret police. All right. I'll put him up here. Put him up here. Yep, you're practically the head of it. Right? And they have this conversation talking here about it's a difficult organization to control, I'm sure. And I love this little back and forth. It's very congenial at first where they're like, oh, you're on extended vacation. Well, how's the kids? Like, what's going on? And Lunge's just like smiles like, like we're just not going to beat around the bush, are we? The confidence Lunge gives off in this episode is kind of staggering. It's not what I expected. I'm not used to Lunge feeling so sure of himself. He's like 2 years ago, the secretary for Senator Borsman, who's the German Democratic candidate, he points this out, committed suicide due to your thorough investigation. So he's like, you're very good at your job. He's like, I know that you are. You're smart. You've got to be a little smarter in what you do. And Lunge's like, you're the fool here. I'm like, what? I'm like, the Czechoslovakian police guy's been built up to be this very intimidating figure. He's just nice to Grimmer because Grimmer pointed out about his nephew. But Lunge just waltzes in, throws his dick on the table, and is like, I'm here to get research. And this guy's like, who are you? And he's like, you know who I am. I'm just amazed by the energy that Lunge brings to this episode. He's like, you have secretly run this country, but now the citizens are frightened of you. He's like, I'm not just here for pleasure. I want to find the existence of true terror. And it's possible the illusion you created gave birth to the devil itself. That is so fascinating to me that we've thought this entire time that Lunge has been after Tenma, right? He wants to find out. The truth of the matter is that he wants to solve who is responsible. Who is responsible for the crimes. And up until now, up until Prague, Tenma has been the most obvious suspect for A, B, and C reasons. But now his search has changed a little bit. He's like, I want to find the source of true terror. And he says that the illusion you created through the secret police gave birth to a devil. Or, roll credits, a monster. So he's like, that's what I want to find out. He's like, I need proof that Johann exists. He's like, I want to see what's going on here. And I love that Rank suddenly is like, is this about the Red Rose Mansion? Is this about the place we don't go to? And he brings up the information. What's interesting is he gets into the briefcase that he's brought here and brings out the book from all the pen names, The Monster Without a Name. And he's like, the address was listed as an old farmhouse for the poppy pen name outside the city, and it's been demolished. And so the Verobecks was a rented office as well. He's like, and no, I haven't found him. What I like about it is the guy's like, did you find Bonaparte? And Lunge's like, no, what's the mansion? What's going on? And what I like is that when Rank asks, did you find Bonaparte? It's almost as if he's like, did you find him? Did you look? Did you find out where he is? So with Bonaparte, is he MIA? Is he still alive? Is he missing?
Do they even know where he is? Is part of the reason they're trying to find Johann to try to like lure him out? It would be kind of cool if they're trying to find Bonaparte and they're thinking, well, if we have his son, then we can lure him over here. Because I'm like 95% sure that Bonaparte is Johann and Nina's dad. Like nearly certain, right? And Lunge's like, who is he? What is the mansion? What's going on? He's like, every time I run a search on him, I come up with nothing. That means he's under your protection. So he's like, he's an old Czechoslovakian secret police officer. And they're like, what do you want? What do you want to know about him? He's like, I want to know what you know. And he's like, well, I know nothing. He's like, Rank is like, I have specifically kept out of this because I don't want to be involved. All I know is that I've been consciously trying to forget that mansion even exists. Oh my God. So there is a talk in this episode about names and existence. So we have the idea of Grimmer and Johann both wanting to have their names forgotten. And then we have Rank, who wants to forget the mansion and its events. Put that in quotation marks. What's interesting about Johann and Grimmer is that Johann wants to erase every fabric of his existence, and he wants to just depersonalize himself and vanish from sight. For Grimmer, it's a little bit different than that. Johann is trying to like depersonalize entirely. And for Grimmer, it's almost as if the Grimmer name itself is just like an alter of his, kind of like Steiner. He's like, I just don't want to be that anymore, right? And now that he's gained the power of emotions, maybe things will be different in that respect. But yeah, he's like, and it's not even that he wants to forget being Grimmer. It's not even that. It's, I guess, you know what it is? Oh my God, you know what it is? It's the two monsters. It's the monster from the west and the monster from the east. You have Johann, who is obsessed with eliminating his name, and you have Grimmer, who doesn't care about the name. Grimmer's like, it's just a name. It's like, I'll just get rid of it like anything else. It's like Steiner. It's just a name. It doesn't mean anything. He's like, it wasn't even my real name to begin with. It was a given name to me that means nothing. I've just accepted it because it's been convenient. But he's like, I don't need it to exist. It literally is the two monsters. You have Johann, who wants to wipe out the existence of the monster and depersonalize himself. And then you have Grimmer, who's like, a name is a name. He's like, I don't need it to survive. Whatever. Oh my God. It's literally the two monsters. Which you could do that with a lot of people in this series. But that's so fascinating. And then Rank says, I didn't do anything with the mansion. I didn't want to get near it. I didn't want to touch it. I just wanted to leave it like it was. And Lunge's like, well, he's like, all the political prisoners and researchers held there vanished one day. Like they just left. And Lunge's like, people don't just vanish. That's the story. So, we know in this mansion, we'll go talk about this mansion. So, we know in this mansion, Lunge has found traces of over 20 dead bodies. That's terrifying. And antiseptics. And he was a brain surgeon, so it is very likely that he was doing some kind of human experimentation on them in the mansion. And just covering it by it looking like this beautiful mansion. I don't know. He's like, what is the wall for? And so he says that when I was at the mansion a few days ago, it looked completely abandoned, but there was a wall built there hastily to hide something. Can I break it down? And Rank is like shaking. He's acting like Nina did when Nina was having that reaction to the book. I'm like, I don't know. If that wall is there,
what are we gonna do? He's like, what are you afraid of? He's like, you may die. If we come closer, we may come face to face with true terror. I mean, and Lunge is like, sweet, neat, thanks, I'll go break it down now. Oh my God. So yeah, so he goes to the house. I love the detail of the vines and the roses have kind of worked their way into the house, even though it's been abandoned. It's like worked its way in there. And then we have the stairs that look very similar to the stairs going up to the apartment, which is kind of creepy, but that's like an architectural thing. Like that's something, you know, in certain regions, the architecture kind of, it's all built by the same people. So it wouldn't be surprising if the architecture was similar, but the fact the mansion has like doors after doors and rooms after rooms, it would be very easy to hide bodies there. It'd be very easy to experiment on people. It'd be very easy to do a multitude of things. It's not, I'm getting the impression that it wasn't just Bonaparte and the twins and the mom that were living there. And we know the mom and the twins weren't there all the time because they were in the other apartment. I give Lunge a lot of, I give him an A for effort for just like doing it all himself. He's like, I'll just tear down this wall by myself. I don't care. But you know what? If somebody put an entire concrete wall up there in a building to hide something, I'd say they did it for a very important reason. I don't know if I'd want to go in that, but he does. He manages to like knock it down, and there's the door that must not be opened. Nope. That's a big negatory there, Ghost Rider. So he pushes open the door, and then we go to the editor who sees him. And so he's like, what was he like? And he's like, he used to sit in that chair just like that. My daughter would play with him often, but would say, that man is scary. Yeah, you know, we've just spent the last several episodes learning about how kids are really intuitive about things and kind of like know what's up. And so his daughter saying that man's scary, I would kind of believe her. I'd be like, oh, wow, really? What makes him scary to you, hun? Because he doesn't, in all the pictures we've seen of him so far, he does not look like a pleasant person. I would be curious knowing if the daughter did remember anything from him. That would be interesting if she did remember him. And we've still got like 24 episodes left, so we have plenty of time to find that out, Tenma, if you get out of the police and manage to find him. His mannerisms, his way of speaking. The clothes he wore were all in like the government VIPs under the old regime. He had a gentleness and an elegance about him, which is like Johann, right? So we have Bonaparte, and he's described as having this gentleness and elegance. Yeah, and that seems unsuspecting. You're like, oh, well, he would just seem like a gentle, elegant guy. He was had a master's in psychology and was a practicing psychologist. So he had his MA in psychology and was a psychologist, which, you know, if you're dealing with Kinderheim and, you know, brainwashing people, you probably need to know that. But then he says this, he was also a medical doctor. His specialty was brain surgery. So he's a brain surgeon. Well, Tenma can relate. That adds a whole nother can of worms to all of this. That adds a whole nother layer of creepy over the Johann thing. Because not only was Tenma old enough to be Johann's father at the time, but the fact that he was a brain surgeon and the fact that Johann kind of connected to him, the fact that Johann said that Tenma was like a father figure to him and his dad was a brain surgeon too, his biological one. This is getting to like, I'm like, is Johann targeting Tenma because he reminded him of his dad who was maybe evil? I don't know. But it could be. And Tenma's like, oh, I see! This is going some creepy directions. And then, yeah, he's like, the last time I saw him, he had this book in mind with this new story. And he looked refreshed. And it was the new story, and he called it, and he says what kind of story it was, and he laughs about it. And says, about a monster falling in love. So, I mean, the idea of a monster falling in love could definitely be like him falling in love with Johann and Nina's mom, right? And so but he said it was a cross between like Beauty and the Beast and Sleeping Beauty. Well, if he's referring to himself as the monster and her as the beauty, that kind of makes sense. He's like, but it was too similar to those other stories. I rejected it. In the doorway before he left, he said, well, how about this one? And then he says, the door that must never be opened. And I asked him, on the other side of the door, you find paradise or a monster biding its time. And he said, since the door must never be opened, there is no story. What? It's like Schrodinger's cat, right? We never know, right? So it's like, do you find on either side, do you find paradise or a monster? And you're never supposed to open the door and find out. It's very creepy. He looks very creepy throughout that. Yeah. Nope. And that's it. And he laughed and left. Being like the door that must never be opened. Be like, well, you shouldn't find that out. It's just, this gets creepier and creepier, right? The story gets creepier and creepier. This mansion gets creepier and creepier. I'm a little bit worried about, and that was the last time I saw him. And then he wrote the monster book, right? And Tim was like, well, this is messed up. I don't know what to think about this. And so then, yeah, now it makes sense that Grimmer had decided he was going to leave and decided he was going to save Sook. And so he was meeting up with Timma to see him one last time before he went on his way. And that's when the one guy, the editor calls the police on Tenma. So Lunge goes into the darkness, like you do, and he says he smells ethanol, and it reeks of antiseptics. And he starts to, like, get the light through. And this room is a lot bigger. It's like a whole wing. Like, it's just a whole wing that's been blocked, which is interesting. Like, a whole damn room that had bodies everywhere. Yeah, you can see you can see where bodies have been, like, laying across the floor dead. Like, what the fudge? And there's the picture of the mom. Yeah, because he looks there and he's like, the dead. How many? How many people died here? He's like 10, 20. No, more than that. And then he sees the portrait of the woman hanging. It looks like a wedding dress hanging up there. Yep. And it's her. She doesn't look happy at all, right? She doesn't look happy in the portrait at all. She looks very somber and sad. And she looks exactly like Nina and Johann. So what do we do with that? So then all the kids, right, go up to the soccer field. And Milos isn't paying attention. He's like, oh no, he's going to score. And he's just staring and he blocks it with his head. For a second, I thought that him blocking the ball with his head was going to, like, trigger something and, like, make him become evil, you know? But instead, he laughs it off. And so Grimmer's like, well, he seems like he's okay. So maybe we'll be all right. And the kids were laughing and playing with him and congratulating him. So at least there's that, right? It seems to be a positive environment for Milos. So good. But, like I said, it makes sense now why Grimmer doesn't want to see him. Because he's like, I don't want to acknowledge those kids and get them used to seeing me all the time because I'm about to leave and they're not going to be able to see me and I don't want them to feel disappointed. So, and if Milos is doing okay, then he doesn't want to stir up any bad memories with him from that night. So, no, it makes sense, you know. And so what's going to happen to Sook? He's the prime suspect. He's going to be socially blacklisted. But how could we show that the blonde girl left the crime scene? That's the problem. He's like, Sook's in the same predicament that you're in. Yeah, there's no way to prove you're innocent. But there is one thing. And Tim was like, what? And that's when he says goodbye. And it happens so sudden, but like, Grimmer, who doesn't, know how emotions work, he just is like, I have to leave. This is all that there is to it. And it's like, they built this bond, and he's been here for 10 episodes, and he's literally like the best character in the show. Again, though, I
I can't complain because, like, Richard's died and Mirror's died and all these other characters have died. And so I'm like, okay, all right, mangaka, if you're giving Grimmer an out and letting him live, I'll take it. I kept thinking something bad was going to happen this whole episode. Like, when they reached in to like, shake their hands and he says goodbye, when he turns back around, I kept thinking, like, a sniper was going to snipe him out of the scene. Like, that's what this show has conditioned me to think. And so, if he has to live and get past this, then fine. There's only one person who knows all the details, and that's me. If I hand this over to police, details only the killer would know. Grimmer returned to Germany before you even knew it. And even though the police will try to catch him, Grimmer is capable of staying out of their reach. And I like that he uses it in the third person. Like, he's not saying I, he's saying Grimmer. He's like, Grimmer's going to stay out of their reach and they'll never be able to find him because he used to be an elite spy. And Tim was like, but you'll be a suspect for the rest of your life and will always be on the run. He's like, that's fine. Because the man named Grimmer never existed in the first place. And that smile, like, you can tell he's sad about leaving Tenma and all that, but at the same time, he's right. Grimmer was just a made-up name, so he could just leave that behind. He never existed in the first place. Yeah, saying someone gave him that name out of convenience. Even if Grimmer's a suspect the rest of his life, it'd be fine. Oh, it's like something like that. What do you think of the decision I made? And he's like, don't tell me. He's like, never mind, forget it. You're heading to the Rose Mansion right now. And he's like, yeah. And he's like, I hope you may be getting close to your goal, right? Well, we got 24 episodes left, so let's not get hasty. We still got some time left before we find anything else out, right? And then Tim was like, I don't know. He says, even if I tell you to be reckless, it won't change anything, will it? And that's me. And he's like, just don't die. Oh, I want them to be together. Why, show? He tells Timma not to die. I know Timma better not die, but at the same time, same to you, Grimmer. You better not die either. Damn it. Damn it. It's freaking sad. And then he leaves. He says, Mr. Grimmer, the promise we made. And then he's like, yeah, that we'd have good cheese and wine and food and all that. He's like, let's do that again. And then, yeah, he smiles at him and I'm like, ugh. And then he's like, I'll always be living in fear of that sound from here on out. The sound of a police siren. But he's going to do it to save Sook. Damn it. I'm like, Grimmer's so nice. He's willing to sacrifice himself to save Sook, who did nothing wrong. And the thing about it is, Johan set that whole situation up, right? Johan's the one that set Sook up to begin with. So, basically, so Grimmer is sacrificing himself to get Sook out of a mess that Johan created. I really would like Johan and Grimmer to meet, because I would like to hear their conversation, because I feel like there would be something very interesting of Grimmer and Sook to talk about. But then or Grimmer and Johan. But then on the other hand, I don't want Grimmer 10 feet near Johan, because Johan's so dangerous. I'm like, no, I don't. It's again, this show gives us all of these possible scenarios, and it's like a double-edged sword. I want Grimmer and Johan to meet because I think that conversation would be amazing. But then I don't want it to be like the story tale where Johan kills Grimmer after their conversation is over. I don't want that to happen. And then I want Grimmer and Tenma to be able to be together again and have that damn picnic. But I don't see how that's happening in this story. So it's just, it's a lot. And then the kid falls over and Tenma stops and helps him and puts antiseptic on it. And that's when the police come and they're like, we need you to come with us. And they have him cornered. Damn it. The only thing I can hope at this point, is that Lunge finds out that Tenma's in custody. And since Lunge knows the head of the secret police, the only thing I can hope is that the head of the secret police and Lunge get Tenma out to help find answers about the Rose Mansion because they want to find Johann. That's the only thing I can hope, is that Lunge being in Prague might actually be a good thing and could be somewhat relevant. That's all we can hope for. I don't know. Johann wasn't in this episode at all. I'm fine if Johann takes a break for a little bit. He just stays off here for a while. But I really am hoping, since Lunge is there, that he helps get Tenma out of the situation, because it's a lot. But yeah, God. Ugh. So I'm really sad that Grimmer's leaving, but I'm happy he's alive for now. I am hoping that Lunge helps Tenma get out of this situation somehow, and the Czech police guy helps Tenma get out of the situation somehow. I'm very, very curious about the Rose Mansion now, and why these people all died, what all happened, what went down, why is Rank trying to forget it. I need to know. So, yeah. And we'll find out next episode. Hopefully some answers. Hopefully, if we're lucky. So, yeah. So, with that being said, I hope you all enjoyed this episode's discussion reaction. Things are happening, and Lunge, I can't believe that I'm happy Lunge is in Prague, but he may be Tenma's saving grace, so I'm happy that Lunge is in Prague. Or he may make things worse. Who knows? We'll find out hopefully more next week. But in the meantime, I hope you all have a wonderful week yourself. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah. I'll be back very soon with episode 51 of Monster. Bye!